CYSYLLTIAD. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the meeting of Cabinet being held today, the 23rd of January 2024. This meeting webcast, with the exception of any business that the Cabinet resolves to exclude the press and public because of the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined by the Local Government Act 1972. The meeting is being held as a hybrid meeting with Cabinet members attending in person at the Council Chamber, County Hall, or remotely via video conference. For transparency purposes, I will ask the monitoring officer to identify which Cabinet members are in attendance and whether they are attending in person or remotely.
Thank you, Leader. Present in the Chamber from Cabinet, the Leader, Councillor Jason McClellan, Deputy Leader, Councillor Jill German, Councillor Ellen Heaton, Councillor Gwyneth Ellis, Councillor Emma Wynne, Councillor Barry Mellor, Councillor Hughes Thomas, Councillor Julie Matthews. I understand Councillor Winmull and James will be slightly late. She's attending another meeting.
Yeah, Councillor Winmull and James is at a meeting with the Minister and should be here about
also
10:30.
Also in attendance are non-Cabinet members. So in the Chamber, there are Councillors Pauline Edwards, Councillor Hugh Williams, Councillor Hugh Irving, Councillor Andrea Tomlin, Councillor Bobby Feely, Councillor Terry Mendes, Councillor Karen Edwards and Councillor Hugh Hilditch Roberts. And attending as observers online, Councillors Alan James, Ellie Chad, Cheryl Williams, Anne Davis, James Elson, Brian Jones, Gareth Sandlands and James May. And, sorry, just Councillor David Williams as well, I've just noticed on screen.
Okay, thank you. Those attending remotely are kindly asked to mute their microphones unless they are called upon to speak. Cabinet members also asked to have their video switched on throughout the meeting unless I specifically request you to turn your video off to improve the quality of the audio link when speaking. You will be expected to restart your video once you have finished speaking. Please refrain from using the chat facility as messages sent to all are visible on the webcast. Those present in the chamber are asked to make sure they speak directly into the microphone to improve the quality of the sound for those attending remotely. To aid transparency, all the meeting's business must be conducted through the chair. We've had no apologies from Cabinet, and I'll hand over to Gary for the declaration of interests.
Diolch, Mr Arweinydd. Bydd aelodau yn ymwybodol o'r gyfyniad o dan god ymddygiad y cyngor I ddatgan unrhyw gysylltiad personol neu sy'n rhagfarnu mewn perthynas ag unrhyw busnes i'w ystyried yn y cyfarfod heddiw. Dylai cysylltiadau o'r fath gael eu datgelu nawr neu gyntad ac y bydd y cynghorydd yr effeithir arnynt yn ymwybodol fod ganddynt gysylltiad personol neu sy'n rhagfarnu yn y materion heddiw. Mae'n ofynnol I holl aelodau sy'n datgan cysylltiad I nodi'n glir beth yw'r cysylltiad ac I hysbysu pa un yw'n gysylltiad personol neu'n gysylltiad personol sy'n rhagfarnu fel y diffinwyd yn y cod ymddygiad. Mae'n ofynnol I unrhyw aelod sy'n datgan cysylltiad sy'n rhagfarnu I adael y cyfarfod yn ystod y drafodaeth ac ni ellir cymryd rhan mewn unrhyw drafodion. Gall aelodau a ddiddordeb personol yn unig gymryd rhan yn y drafodaeth ac unrhyw bleidlais. Os bydd cysylltiad personol sy'n rhagfarnu yn cael ei ddatgelu heddiw nad yw wedi ddatgelu ei gofnodi yn flaenorol, bydd yn ofynnol i'r cynghorydd dan sylw lenwi a llofnodi ffurflen datgan cysylltiad sydd yna ar gael gan staff cefnogi'r pwyllgor sy'n bresennol heddiw neu ar-lein.
Diolch, Gary. Any members present or on the screen need to make any declarations of interest? No. Okay. Urgent matters. I've not been informed of any urgent matters ahead of this meeting. No, Gary. No. Okay, so we'll go on to the minutes of the Cabinet meeting held on the 19th of December. Okay, so it will go through for accuracy, so as they appear on the electronic pack, page 7, page 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Okay. Any issues around accuracy? No. Same page numbers in the electronic pack. Any issues around any matters arising from the minutes of that meeting? Okay. No hands up on the screen. Could I have a proposer that those minutes are a true reflection of the meeting held on the 19th of December, proposed by Councillor Mellor, seconded by Councillor Emma Wynne. Diolch yn fawr. Okay, so we will now move to the first substantive item on the agenda today, and that is the outcome of the Community Scrutiny Committee's review of this Cabinet's decision relating to libraries made last month on the 19th of December, and welcoming Hugh Williams as chair of the Community Scrutiny. Hugh, you chaired the meeting in the early in the new year. Hugh's report is in the papers, I'm sure you've all read. So I'll ask you to present your report and to feedback from the Scrutiny Committee, and we'll then go to lead member Emrys. Gwyneth was invited to attend as lead member for finance, so we'll hear from Gwyneth as well. So Hugh, diolch yn fawr. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I seem to be here every month at the moment, but yeah.
Good, you're reporting back. That's what we want.
Yeah. Obviously, we had a meeting after the call-in papers were signed by members from outside the Cabinet. We had a meeting on the 11th of January. The meeting lasted way over 2 hours. Lots of questions, lots of answers. Quite a robust meeting, and the committee had particular concerns of the reduction of the opening hours. They also, having regards that they felt that it was unfair for the community. It was quite a debate, really, and I'm sure you've all read your papers today, really. So going to the, having considered the points raised by the Scrutiny Committee, the availability for easily access to libraries, the one-stop shop, available for warm spaces, available facilities to enable country's children and young people to study and research, availability facilities for community groups. They were just some of the concerns which were held, really. So after a long discussion, the committee came to the reasons why they felt the Cabinet should revisit this today, and the reasons are 3.1. The Cabinet acknowledges the Committee observations, including the recommendations following the visit to the Cabinet decision relating to libraries, a one-stop shop, agreeing the community's recommendation to postpone the implementation of the decision until further explorational work has done, identify alternative funding sources available from outside the councils, further with private or public sector. So in a nutshell, to be quite quick on that, that's what we came up with. And I'd just like to thank everybody on the committee and members of the Cabinet who came. And it was a tough meeting, and a few bruises after it, but we got there in the end. And it's great we have this opportunity to bring things to scrutiny. And with the decision, I felt it wasn't a political football in the end, because members from all different groups actually called this back in. So thank you, Chair. And if I can answer anything, I will.
Thanks, thank you, Hugh. Thanks for your report. So I'll bring in, as I said, the lead member. But if you're able to stay in, if there are any questions, I'll hand over to Emrys.
Diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd, a diolch yn fawr Hugh am adroddiad. Mae'r adroddiad gyda ymddiheuriad yn bron yn ailadrodd yr hyn ddech chi byddwch chi eisoes wedi gweld yn y ddau gyfarfod dwytha, ond mae yna eitemau dwi'n pwysleisio yn nhw sydd yn ymateb i'r galw mewn. Fi'n amlwg yn parchu'r hawl i aelodau alw penderfyniad y Cabinet i mewn, ac roedd yn hapus i drafod materion yn helaeth eto yn y Pwyllgor Craffu. Fi'n cydnabod ac yn cydymdeimlo â'r pryderon y godwyd gan y Pwyllgor Craffu ac aelodau eraill ynglŷn â'r effaith bosibl y byddai gostyngiad yn yr oriau agor yn ei chael, ac mae'r pryderon hynny wedi'i nodi yn paragraff 4.6 o'r adroddiad sydd ger ein bron ni heddiw. Beth bynnag, yn fy marn i, Mae marn i yw bod y rhesymau dros alw i mewn a'r pryderon a nodir ym mharagraff 4.6 i gyd wedi'w trafod yn drylwyr yn ystod cyfarfod blaenorol y Cabinet ar y 4 a 15 o Ragfyr. Felly fy marn i yw ein bod fel Cabinet yn gwbl ymwybodol o'r holl faterion a risgiau hyn pan wnaethom y penderfyniad hwnnw. Rwy wedi gwneud yn gwbl glir ym mhob cyfarfod nad yw'r penderfyniad i leihau gwasanaeth llyfrgell yn cyd-fynd y dda â mi. Fodd bynnag, da ni gyd yn gwybod bod yr her gyllidebol sydd yn wynebu'r cyngor ar hyn o bryd a'i fod o'n ddigynsail. Ac mae'r penderfyniad hwn yn anffodus yn angenreidiol i ymateb i'r her ariannol a gosod cyllideb gytbwys. Ni hoffi'n atgoffa pawb na fydd y penderfyniad hwn yn golygu y bydd unrhyw lyfrgell yn Sir Ddinbych yn gorfod cau. Bydd yr holl wasanaethau a ddarperir yn eu llyfrgelloedd ar hyn o bryd yn parhau i gael eu darparu, y bydd y gwasanaeth llyfrgell yn gweithredu ar lai o oriau. Mae rhaid pwysleisio hynny bod y llyfrgelloedd i gyd yn 8 llyfrgell yn aros ar agor. Dwi'n gyfforddus bod y Cabinet wedi gwrando ac wedi ymateb i'r adborth o'r ymgynghoriad cyhoeddus. Y penderfyniad oedd i lleihau'r oriau agor llyfrgelloedd tua 40% yn ytrach na gostyngiad o 50% ac yn ygwyd yn wreiddiol. Mae'r newid hwn yn arwain at tua 30 awr o oriau agor ychwanegol o gymharu â'r cynnig wreiddiol. Yn adwydd am dorri gwasanaeth llyfrgell o gwbl, mae'r penderfyniad yn eithaf yn y Cabinet yn cynrychioli'r canlyniad gorau posib i'r llyfrgelloedd o ystyried y sefyllfa ariannol sydd yr ydym ynddi. Yn olaf, nid wyf yn cefnogi argymelliad y Pwyllgor Sgrwtini i ohirio gweithredu penderfyniad y Cabinet hyd nes bydd y gwaith pellach yn cael ei wneud i garfod ffynonellau ariannu amgen. Rwyf eisoes wedi ymrwymo i weithio gyda'r aelodau, swyddogion a chynghorau dinas, tref a chymuned i ystyried modelau amgen o ddarparu gwasanaethau llyfrgell gyda golwg ar ddiogelu a thyfu'r ddarpariaeth honno at y dyfodol, gan liniaru'r toriadau a cheisio ffynonellau incwm eraill. Fodd bynnag, fy marn i yw na allwn ohirio'r penderfyniad tra bo'r gwaith hwnnw'n digwydd, oherwydd bod angen i ni osod cyllideb gytbwys ar gyfer y flwyddyn ariannol nesaf. Dwi ddim yn mynd i ailadrodd y trafodaethau oedd yn cyfarfod y Cabinet ar y 4/15/2023 ac yn y Pwyllgor Craffu Cymunedau ar 11 o Ionawr eleni. Ond dwi yn mynd i gadarnhau'r ymrwymiad canlynol a wnaed yn y 2 gyfarfod. Mae'r ymrwymiadau hyn yn ymateb i'r mwyafrif o'r pryderon a leisiwyd yn yr ymgynghoriad cyhoeddus. Bydd adnoddau yn llyfrgelloedd a siopau a mae'r 4 canlynol yn ateb yr hyn y mae arweinydd Pwyllgor Craffu Cymuned wedi'w adrodd rwan. Bydd adnoddau yn llyfrgelloedd a siopau un alwad yn parhau i fod ar agor ar gyfer trigolion y sir ar ddyddiau penodol, yn cynnwys boreau Sadwrn yn y llyfrgelloedd hynny sydd ar agor a fore Sadwrn ar hyn o bryd. Mi fydd yn llyfrgelloedd yn parhau i ddarparu canolfannau clyd i aelodau'r cyhoedd. Bydd cyfleus eraill llyfrgelloedd ar gyfer plant a phobl ifanc i'w defnyddio at bwrpas addysg ac ymchwil a hynny mewn lleoliadau diogel i fydden nhw'n parhau. Ac yn olaf, bydd grwpiau cymunedol, sefydliadau gwirfoddol a sefydliadau busnes yn gallu parhau i gynnal digwyddiadau yn ein adeiladau llyfrgelloedd, hyd yn oed pan nad ydy'r gwasanaeth llyfrgell ei hun ddim ar gael. Wrth leihau'r oriau agor, rydym yn sicrhau na fydd rhaid i'r sir gau unrhyw un o'n 8 llyfrgell. Fi'n darfod ar hynny. Diolch.
Diolch, Emrys. Yes, thank you. I think you made a number of valid points there. The minutes of the 19th of December literally were agreed 10 minutes ago, and I would share your view that the issue, having read the report, I'm grateful again to Hugh for presenting the issues from the report and what was discussed at the community scrutiny. To me, again, if you look over those minutes we've just approved, all those issues were discussed at the Cabinet of the 19th of December. So we do have a commitment to work with partners to look at how best we can having kept the library service, work with partners to fund it further, to look at extending opening hours in the future. Those commitments were there in December and are here now. Okay, so there was two elements to the report. One I've just touched on. The other is the issue around delaying the decision. I'm going to bring in Gwyneth now as lead member for finance and our 151 officer Liz as well to address that issue. Thank you, Gwyneth. Diolch.
Diolch yn fawr Arweinydd. Diolch yw cadeirydd y Pwyllgor Craffu am y croeso gyda ni. Ac mi oedd hi'n odaeth drylwyr iawn yn doedd. Felly mi oedd y Pwyllgor Craffu fewn i'r adroddiad yn fanwl. Dwi yn falch o weld o'r argymhelliad yn fan hyn, nad ydych chi fel Pwyllgor Craffu ddim yn gofyn i ni newid yn meddwl ar hyn. Be ydych chi'n ofyn i ni wneud, os dwi'n glir yn fan hyn, ydy yn bod ni'n gohirio'r penderfyniad nes yn bod ni wedi gwneud ymchwil i fewn i ffyrdd amgen o ariannu yr llyfrgelloedd. Dwi'n meddwl, y broblem efo hynna ydy bod o rhy ben agored. Mi allan ni hynny ydy, mi allan ni wneud ymchwil am 6 mis, ac ar ddiwedd yr ymchwil, da ni ddim wedi gallu ffeindio ffyrdd amgen, a da ni'n gorfod dod yn ôl i wneud beth da ni eisiau wneud yn y lle cyntaf. Dwi'n meddwl bod Emrys wedi crynhoi hyn. Da ni wedi rhoi addewid i wneud beth da chi eisiau, sef edrych i fewn i ffyrdd amgen o gyflenwi'r gwasanaeth llyfrgelloedd, ond nad ydym ni ddim yn mynd i ohirio'r penderfyniad cyn gwneud hynny. Dyna di'r penderfyniad wnaethon ni yn y cabinet, a fel aelod arweiniol dros gyllid, dwi'n meddwl bod hi'n hanfodol yn bod ni'n aros efo'r penderfyniad yna, mwyn cael cyllideb gytpwys. Mae rhaid i ni wneud y toriadau, mae rhaid i ni gael arbedion, felly fedra ni ddim gohirio'r penderfyniad yn fy marn ni, wrth gwrs mi ydym ni'n mynd i fynd ymlaen i wneud yr gwaith ymchwil yna. Felly, o ran yr argymhellion yn yr adroddiad, dwi'n meddwl 3.1, bod ni'n cydnabod drafodaeth gafwyd yn y Pwyllgor Craffu, os dwi'n cofio'n iawn. Da ni'n gwneud hynny, da ni'n ddiolchgar i'r Pwyllgor Craffu, dwi'n siŵr neu mi ydw i beth bynnag. O ran 3.2, fyswn ni'n dadlen na ddylwn ni ddim aros, mae rhaid i ni wneud hyn rwan. Yn bod ni'n wrth gydnabod eich teimladau chi bod ni yn fel mae Emrys wedi dweud, yn cadarnhau bod ni'n mynd i wneud y gwaith. Diolch.
Thank you. Liz, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you. Diolch yn fawr. Good morning, everybody. Bore da. Nothing much really to add to what Gwyneth and Emrys have said. It's the delay in taking the decision that would cause the practical issues. We are next on the agenda is the budget. This generates a saving of approximately 360,000 to contribute to that. But the savings targets that we need to make for next year in total are coming up to 10.4 million, and 3 million of those, we haven't got them yet. The decision is a difficult decision to make, but we have to start to make those difficult decisions in order to move forward. Otherwise, there's too much risk being placed on the budget. So that's all I had to sort of say, Chair.
Okay, any other cabinet members want to come in? No. Barry.
Thanks you for the report from scrutiny. I just want to try and remind members why we're here. Northamptonshire, Slough, Croydon, Thurrock, Woking, Birmingham, Nottingham. 7 councils, all in England, but all gone bankrupt with one notices gone in. There's many Welsh councils also on the brink. And if we don't try and do our best to make budget, pardon? if we don't do our best to try and make budget, then we'll be one of those numbers. And I don't think any of us on this council want Denbighshire to be in that position. I just wanted to bring that up. Thanks very much.
Thank you. I think there was a comment from the back there, making no issue about this, but just remind members as to the preamble that meetings, today's business must be conducted through the chair. Thanks very much. Okay. Do you want to come back? Is there anything you want to
thank
say?
you, and thank you for everybody's response, really. I just want to just very quickly, really, you know, it was the biggest response we've had from the general public, and it was there were some passionate speakers as community councillors. You know, we've all got a job to do, and from our side as community councillors, you know, we've got to fight for our communities, and I think the whole committee was passionate, and I'm sure you're all passionate as well. And it was just, they wish they would have explored a lot more with, not wanting to go over things again. They could have explored much more with community councils, with the likes of Jamie Groves, his leisure company. We just felt there was a lot more that could have been done, but I don't want to open a debate again, Chairman. So I'll leave it like that. So, you know,
Yeah.
Everybody's passionate in this room.
Okay, thanks, Hugh. I mean, look, the one thing we can all agree on, that's nobody wants to close libraries. That's like one thing we all can agree with. And you know, it's right that this difficult decision has gone through all democratic processes. Don't propose to have any lengthy debate today. We've been through all the arguments, and there's difficult decisions to be made this morning, quite apart from this one. So again, thanks, Hugh. Rhys, did you indicate you wanted to come in?
Diolch yn fawr, arweinydd. Diolch yn fawr iawn, Hugh, am yr adroddiad, a diolch am gydeirio'r cyfarfod craffu galw i mewn. Diolch i Gwyneth ac i Emrys hefyd am ei adroddiadau nôl. Dwi'n cytuno gyda ti, Hugh, dwi'n meddwl gallwch chi drafod hyn gormod. Mae yna lawer iawn o drafod wedi bod ar y penderfyniad yma, ac oedd galw fo i fewn yn gyfle arall i drafod hyn. Ond pan dwi'n edrych ar yn sefyllfa ariannol ni, fel mae Barry newydd ddweud, mi ddwedes i yn y cyfarfod cabinet diwetha mod i yn gwynebu hyn gyda calon drom iawn. Mi ddwedodd cynghorydd Julie wrth yn ochr i, dylen ni ddim fod wedi dweud calon drom, dylwn ni fod wedi dweud yn wyllt gacwn. Ac dwi'n meddwl mae dyna sut mae pob un ohono ni ar y cabinet, a pob un ohonoch chi ar y pwyllgor craffu, a'r cynghorwyr yn gyffredinol yn teimlo, dylen ni ddim fod yn gorfod gwynebu y fath sefyllfa a dyn ni ynddo a pob cyngor arall. Dyn ni wedi trafod tipyn o hyn fel cabinet, ac dyn ni wedi ceisio diogelu'n llyfrgelloedd fel bod na ddim un llyfrgell yn cau. Yn yr wythnosau'r misoedd nesaf, falle welwn ni bod hynny ddim yn digwydd ym mhob un ardal awdurdod lleol, a byddwn ni yn sefyll allan fel awdurdod lleol sydd wedi llwyddo i beidio cau unrhyw un o'n llyfrgelloedd. Felly eto, calon drom, wedi gwylltio'n gacwn bod ni'n gorfod gwneud hyn, ond mae'r sefyllfa ariannol mor ddwys. Dwi'n gwrando ar beth mae'n prif swyddog ariannol yn ei ddweud. Dach chi gyd wedi bod yn y gweithdai ar y gyllideb. Dach chi gyd wedi gweld beth yw'r bwlch leni a'r bwlch blwyddyn nesaf a'r flwyddyn wedyn. Felly dwi ddim yn gallu gweld yn fan hyn bod na gynnig yn cael ei wneud, bod na arbed arian yn gallu cymeryd mewn ardal arall o wasanaethau'r cyngor. Mae pob gwasanaeth y cyngor yn mynd i orfod gwynebu y torri yma. Felly Dwi'n ddiolchgar iawn am y drafodaeth. Diolch bo' chi wedi edrych o ddifri ar hyn ac mi rydw i yn gobeithio bod yn swyddogion ni yn mynd i weithio ar fyrder, ar frys gyda cynghorau cymuned a thre a dinas a'r sector gwirfoddol a busnesau mwyn ceisio lleihau ar y toriadau yma ac i gadw yn llyfrgelloedd yn agored mewn rhyw ffordd neu gilydd. Dwi'n siŵr bod swyddogion yn gallu rhoi'r sicrwydd hynny bod y gwaith hynny gobeithio wedi cychwyn yn barod. Dyna'r cyfan sydd gennai ddweud arweinydd. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch, Rhys. Gwyneth, do you want to come back?
Yeah, I was just wondering whether it would be appropriate for me to suggest a gwelliant for the proposal. Mi fyswn ni yn hoffi cynnig gwelliant i'r argymhellion. Hynny ydy, argymhelliad 3.1 yn aros fel mae o, yn bod ni yn cydnabod yr sylwadau Pwyllgor Craffu ac yn diolch iddyn nhw am y gwaith maen nhw wedi wneud. Ond argymhelliad 3.2 yn newid i ddeud yn bod ni'n anghytuno i argymhelliad y Pwyllgor i ohirio gweithrediad y penderfyniad. Ond yn bod ni yn ymgymryd i wneud mwy o waith archwilio mwyn canfod ffynonellau gyllido amgen wrth symud ymlaen. Mi fyswn ni'n hoffi cynnig y gwelliant yna i'r argymhellion, os gwelwch chi dda.
Okay. I'll in terms of the recommendations, obviously this is a call in, so we're in a slightly different position to a usual report. So I'll hand over to Gary as legal officer to work through the mechanics of that, if I may.
Yeah, so just start at the beginning. The purpose of call-in is for the implementation of a decision to be delayed until it's had further consideration by scrutiny. That took place at the community scrutiny meeting that Councillor Williams has just reported back on. Scrutiny can decide to let the decision run or to refer it back for further consideration. It's referred it back. So we're at the point in the process now where Cabinet can do one of three things. You can accept scrutiny's recommendation. You can confirm your original decision and not accept scrutiny's recommendation, or you can do something else. So the proposal that's been made by Councillor Ellis is in effect that you disagree with the scrutiny committee recommendation, that you confirm your original decision, but that you undertake to do further exploratory work to find alternative sources of funding. I think, is that? That 3.1 stays as it is, yes, yeah.
Okay, I agree with that. Okay. Okay, I'm going to bring Graham in as Chief Exec.
Thanks, Lady. Yeah, I was just going to say from an officer perspective, we will commit to working with partners to find alternative ways of supporting our libraries. That's clear, so I want to give that commitment on the record. I think making the decision today in terms of the budget will allow for clarity and certainty. In terms of those discussions with partners, and we've talked about town, city, community councils, community groups, voluntary sector, business sector. I think the decision in terms of the budget will allow for clarity with those discussions. And what I'm doing today is giving a commitment to officers, and I think all the members have asked for that. So I'm just giving that we will work with those groups to look to support how we can find ways to support our libraries going forward. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Graham. Okay, Hugh. Hugh, you've got your hand up. This process, rightly so, has gone through all of our democratic processes. It was discussed at length at the Cabinet last month. It was, sorry, Hugh Irving behind you, Hugh Williams. I've always said there's too many Hughs in this local authority. And rightly so, it's been through all our democratic services. You said yourself, Hugh, I believe the meeting was getting on for 3 hours in communities. I don't propose to extend that debate today. You heard some clear and succinct arguments from Cabinet in response to the report, and you've had our thanks as well. I don't know, Hugh, if your point has to be concentrated on the report and the recommendations about further work we do, which we've heard from Graham. and the financial pressures which you heard from the chief, from the 151 officer and the lead member. We can't have the debate to go any further than that. So if you can be brief, Hugh, I'm not sure what you want to come in on. Yes, please, Hugh, Councillor Hugh Irving.
I think do we need mics and things?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Florida, as the person that proposed the motion originally, I'm pleased that it's resulted in this debate this morning. I would, under those circumstances, just ask your indulgence to address the committee on the reasons why I did it, but I won't revisit the reasons. And I would appreciate that indulgence, please, Leader.
But I think, Hugh, we've got a busy schedule today, and we know your reasons why you brought it back. We wouldn't disagree with those reasons. It's the financial pressures that we find ourselves in that have placed us in this difficult position where we're going to have to make those decisions. I think the reasons you set out, Hugh, you know, we heard them in the community scrutiny, we heard them in the cabinet, and you know, times of an issue here. So I'm going to go to Gary now for the recommendations. Thanks.
And you won't allow me to challenge the fact that a service, a high-performing, respected service where the head librarian has recently seen fit to resign, is having a 40% cut imposed upon it. That's something I think will be unprecedented in local government terms. Does any other service get 40 to 50% cut imposed on it?
I think we are in, you're absolutely right, Hugh, we are in completely unprecedented times. That is one thing I would agree with you on. We've had a lengthy debate, a good debate. It's right that we've had that debate. We've heard the arguments why we shouldn't. We don't disagree with them. You've heard what the members of this cabinet have said. Nobody wants to do this. We're in unprecedented times, as you said yourself. The debate has been had. It's extended over a lengthy time on the 19th of December and for nearly 3 hours in the Community Scrutiny Committee. We've heard what you said. Grateful for what you said. Grateful to Hugh Williams. Grateful to all the committee coming back. We're not reopening the debate. We're going to go to the rest.
So we just ignore 9,000 respondents and a scrutiny committee.
We haven't ignored 9,000 respondents. We have responded. We have responded to the consultation in a number of ways, which you've heard from Emrys, opening on Saturdays, having community groups in. The opening hours have been considered. We've gone down from 50 to we were open 60% of the time now. We have responded. Hugh, you're reopening a debate which we've already had. Okay.
And that's totally undemocratic, and I feel I have got to register a protest.
I'm going to bring Gary in.
Just in terms of process, the process is that Cabinet debated its original decision in December. The process for scrutiny was that 5 members called that in. There was I just checked the time, it was 2.5 hours, so 2 or 3, it's in the middle. There was a 2.5-hour debate at scrutiny on the 11th. The purpose of this meeting is for Cabinet to receive the report from scrutiny, to have regard to the recommendation from scrutiny, and then to consider what action to take, either, as I said, to accept the recommendation or to confirm the original decision or to take some further action. The purpose of this meeting is not to rerun the scrutiny debate that took place in community scrutiny. So the issue, Leader, is that you have before you a proposal from Councillor Ellis, which states that recommendation 3.1 stays and that recommendation 3.2 is amended to say that the Cabinet does not accept scrutiny's recommendation, confirms the original decision made on the 19th of December, and undertakes to do further work to identify alternative sources of funding. So that's the proposal that you have, and I think Councillor Heaton seconded it.
So Hugh, you've heard it from the legal officer, the parameters of the debate today, what they are. So it's on that basis that my decision's been made, and we'll go to the decision. Okay, so Gary, can you just recap from Cabinet members, please?
So the proposal that was made by Councillor Ellis was that recommendation 3.1 stays as is, that recommendation 3.2 is amended to read that Cabinet does not accept Scrutiny Committee's recommendation, confirms its original decision made on the 19th of December, and undertakes to do further work to identify alternative sources of funding.
We've had a proposal and second. All in favour? Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you, Hugh Williams. Thank you, Hugh Irving. We did. We had a vote. Yeah. Yeah. You know. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. We're on the next agenda item, the budget, and we have joined by Liz, and I'll hand over to Gwyneth as lead member. Thank you. Just to clarify as well, Wyn has joined us on the screen. Welcome, Wyn. Hope the meeting with the Minister went well. We'll catch up on that again. So welcome. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr arweinydd, a diolch am ddod ato ni, Liz. Fel eich aelod arweiniol dros gyllid, dwi'n gyfrifol am gyflwyno cyllideb gytpwys i chi. A mae'n rhaid i fi gyfadde fod na gryn deimlad o ryddhad o allu gwneud hynny o gwbl heddiw ar ôl yr holl drafferthion sydd wedi bod yn gymaint o her i ni y flwyddyn yma. Fe gychwynnwyd ar y gwaith yma bron i flwyddyn yn ôl, a thrwy'r cyfnod yma, da ni wedi bod yn eich rhybuddio chi fod y broses hon yn broses anodd, a fod y sefyllfa ariannol yn heriol i ni a deud y lleia. Fel ac yma hi yn wir fel wnaeth Barry ddeud i gynghora eraill ledled y deyrnas gyfunol. Mae'n bwysig i ni nodi nad ydy hon yn sefyllfa unigryw i Sir Ddinbych. Ddim yn broblem ni ydy hon, mae'n broblem i bawb. Mae'n sefyllfa ddigynsail. Ac o'r herwydd, mae'n galw am drefn wahanol i'r hyn welwyd yn ddiweddar. Fel da chi'n gwybod, mae wedi bod yn broses anodd ac anghyfforddus hyd yn hyn. A mae'n rhaid i mi ddiolch i bawb sydd wedi cyfrannu at gyflwyno'r gyllideb hon. Mae wedi cymryd llawer iawn o ymdrech. Na fi di'r aelod arweiniol a Liz ydy'r prif swyddog, mae hon wedi bod yn dasg lle da ni gyd yn aelodau ac yn swyddogion wedi chwarae'n rhan. Felly mae rhaid i mi ddiolch i'r swyddogion sydd wedi cyfrannu i'r cynllun syniadau staff. Mae'r syniadau yma yn cael eu hastudio gan beneithiad gwasanaeth ar hyn o bryd, mwyn cynorthwyo hefo amlygu mwy o arbedion, fel ac y bydd yn rhaid i ni wneud. Diolch hefyd i'r tîm cyllid, Liz, am eu holl waith, ac i'r tîm rheoli corfforaethol a'r uwch dîm arweiniol am eu dyfalbyrhad drwy'r broses. Mae wedi bod yn broses anodd, a mae wedi bod yn anodd weithiau gario ymlaen efo hi. Mi hoffwn ni hefyd dalu teyrnged i'n cyd-aelodau ar y cabinet. Mae nhw fel fi wedi chael hi'n anodd iawn i wynebu penderfyniadau na fysa ni erioed wedi eu hystyried wrth sefyll i gael yn hethol. Da ni wedi wynebu dewisiadau amhosib bron, ond rydyn ni gyd wedi derbyn yn cyfrifoldeb i gyflwyno cyllideb gytbwys, sy'n gyfrifoldeb statudol, a thrwy hynny cadw Sir Ddinbych yn glir o ddwylo'r comisiynwyr. Da ni'n wynebu sefyllfa sydd wedi ei gorfodi arno ni drwy ddewisiadau llywodraeth ganolog, ond mae hi'n sefyllfa sy'n rhaid i ni fel cyngor cyfrifol ddelio ag o. Mae aelodau etholedig y cyngor hefyd wedi cyfrannu'n helaeth i'r broses, trwy Pwyllgor a CRAFFU, nifer fawr iawn o weithdai cyngor, cyfarfodydd grwpiau a rhannu syniadau drwy'r cynllun syniadau aelodau. Felly, diolch yn fawr iawn i chi gyd am fod mor barod i gydweithio ar hyn. Reit, felly, symud ymlaen i'r gyllideb ei hun. Mae'r gost ychwanegol o gyflenwi gwasanaethau yn 2024-2025 o'i gymharu efo'r flwyddyn flaenorol yn 24.7 miliwn o bunnoedd ychwanegol. Wan, amcangyfri ydy hyn, ond mae'n amcangyfri sydd wedi selio ar waith manwl a phrofiad eang, felly mae'n amcangyfri dwi'n ffyddiog iawn yn ddyfo. Mae'r gost yma wedi cynyddu gymaint am nifer o resymau fel da chi'n gwybod. Y rhai mwyaf dylanwadol ydy chwyddiant cyffredinol, chwyddiant mewn egni ac mewn cyfloga, ond hefyd cynnydd mawr mewn galw am wasanaethau rheng flaen. Wan, mwyn cyflwyno cyllideb gytbwys felly, mae'n rhaid i ni sicrhau cynnydd mewn incwm ac arbedion sy'n cyfatab i'r cynnydd yn costa ni. 24.7 miliwn. Y cyfraniad cyntaf i edrach arno ydy'r cynnydd mewn cyllid a gawn ni gan Lywodraeth Cymru. Ein bod ni wedi derbyn cyfraniad mwy hael na'r disgwyl, ac yn wir un o'r ucha yng Nghymru, nid yw'n cynrychioli ond 27% o'r cynnydd yn costa ni. Chydig bach dros chwarter. Mae'n rhaid i'r gweddill ddwad drwy arbedion a chynnydd yn rheth y cyngor. Rydyn ni'n cynnig arbedion fydd werth 10.4 miliwn, felly 42% o'r cynnydd, a chynnydd yn rheth y cyngor fydd werth 7.6 miliwn, y 31% arall. Bydd hyn yn golygu fod treth y cyngor yn codi o 8.23% ac yn ychwanegol at hynny, beth bynnag fydd angen i dalu'r lefi gwasanaeth tân ac argyfwng. Mae hyn wedi newid, mae yna hot off the press ar hyn, felly mi wna i adael i Liz egluro hynny chi nes ymlaen, ond mae yna newidiadau wedi bod. Felly, y cyfanswm i ni fydd 8.23% a beth bynnag sydd ei angen i ychwanegu i dalu'r lefi tân ac argyfwng. Rwan, rydw i'n hollol ymwybodol y bydd codiad yn rheth y cyngor o'r fath yn anodd i breswylwyr Sir Ddinbych. Ond mae hi'n bwysig cofio y bydd y cynllun gostyngiadau'r dreth cyngor yn amddiffyn y rhai mwyaf bregus rhag hyn. Dros gyfnod o 2 flynedd, mi fydd y cynnydd yn rheth y cyngor ychydig yn llai na chwyddiant, i ni weld cynnydd mawr yn y galw am y gwasanaethau. Mae'n bwysig nodi fod pob un o'r cynigion yn yr adroddiad sy'ch blaen chi yn hanfodol i ni allu cyflwyno cyllideb gytbwys. Ac ar yr un pryd, mae rhaid i ni wneud y gorau allwn ni i amddiffyn y rhai mwyaf bregus yn ein cymunedau. Dwi'n siŵr bod ni gyd yn cytuno ar hynny. Wrth edrych ar y gyllideb yma, mae hi'n bwysig fy mod i'n tynnu'ch sylw chi at y risg sy'n rhan ohoni hi. Mae'r her yr ydyn ni'n ei wynebu yn uwch nag erioed o'r blaen, a mae hynny'n wir am y peryglon hefyd. Mae yna beryg y bydd galw am wasanaethau cymhleth yn dal i gynyddu, fel y gymaint wedi gwneud ers y pandemig, gyda mwy o alw am wasanaethau gofal i bobl hŷn a phobl ifanc, a mwy o bobl yn wynebu digartrefedd. Rydyn ni hefyd wedi gosod targedi arbedion uchelgeisiol iawn i beneithiau'r gwasanaeth, heb wybod i sicrwydd beth fydd yr arbedion hynny i gyd. Mae hynny'n rhywbeth nad ni erioed wedi wneud o'r blaen, a mi fydd o'n mynnu'n sylw cyson ni fel cabinet ar hyd y misoedd nesaf. Y ddau reswm yna, y risg sydd gennym ni ydyn ni'n wynebu, ydy'r rheswm fod rhaid i ni amddiffyn ein cronfeydd wrth gefn, a pham fod rhaid i ni sicrhau nad ydym ni'n gwario dim mwy na'r hyn sydd wedi ei gynllunio. Felly, i grynhoi ag i orffen. Mae'n rhaid i fi gydnabod y gwaith aruthrol sydd wedi'i wneud gan bawb i gyrraedd lle da ni heddiw, efo cyllideb gytbwys i'w chyflwyno i chi. Dwi yn cydnabod fod yna risg yn hanfod y gyllideb hon, ac mae yna lawer o waith yn dal i'w gwblhau i sicrhau bod ni'n cyrraedd yr arbedion da ni wedi dargedu. Ond mae hi yn angenrheidiol ein bod ni'n cytuno'r gyllideb hon heddiw, ac yn y cyngor yr wythnos nesaf, oherwydd mi fydd pethau'n llawer iawn gwaith penau ba ni'n gallu cytuno ar gyllideb gytbwys. mi da ni angen cychwyn ar y gwaith o draws newid y cyngor, gan fod y rhagolygon i'r blynyddoedd nesa cynddrwg os nad gwaith na gyfen ni. Felly, diolch arweinydd. Fe hoffwn ni ofyn rwan, os gwelwch chi'n dda, i Liz grynhoi'r manylion sydd yn yr adroddiad. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Gwyneth. And before bringing Liz in, can I just echo your thanks to the officers and members for their hard work, and it's been an incredibly challenging, difficult process. Thanks to Liz and Liz's predecessor, Steve, as well, and the rest of the finance team. And Liz has had a difficult task sort of coming in when she did. So thanks very much. Liz, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Diolch arweinydd, diolch i chi Gwyneth. Yeah, so it's quite a complicated and lengthy report, but I think that reflects the position that we're in. So I'll just take you through some of the detail now. So in terms of the provisional settlement, so we received our settlement on the 20th of December, so just before Christmas. We had been assuming a 3% increase. And in cash terms, so year on year, we've received a 3.6% increase. That's roughly £1 million more than what we were expecting and is positive. However, it doesn't materially change the council's budgetary position or the financial outlook for this year or for future years. In terms of the balanced budget that's in front of you, so that's at Appendix 1, and that's the medium-term financial plan. A few points to point out on what's changed on that recently. So Gwyneth mentioned the fire levy. So yesterday, the Fire Authority met to consider their budget yesterday morning. And they are planning to use some of their reserves in 24-25, and that means there's a reduction in the levy across the region, and that means there'll be a reduction in the pressure that Denbighshire is required to pay, and the reduction is not insignificant at 122,000, so the levy comes down to 716,000 from what we've got included in that figure. So that will have an impact on the council tax as Gwyneth has presented it, so I'll come to that later on. Teachers' pensions, so in the provisional settlements, we've not had confirmation of the funding increase for teachers' pension. Welsh Government recognise the pressure that puts on local government and schools, but are not in a position to be able to confirm that funding as part of the provisional settlements. So the risk resides with us because we know we've got the pressure. So it's prudent that we include that pressure. However, we have no indication other than an indication that funding is coming, but we have nothing concrete upon which. So in being prudent, we've included the cost pressure, but we haven't assumed the funding. The final change on the MTFP is the investment in priorities at the bottom. So the pressure there has been reduced to reflect the proposals on the capital plan for both the highways resurfacing and the net carbon zero and ecologically positive council capital scheme. So they've been reduced. In terms of the savings, the major savings proposals are listed in Appendix 2. The estimated level of savings that is sufficiently developed in order to include within the 24-25 budget total 2.4 million. There are still others on that list that are under development, and we will continue to bring those forward under the budgetary process that we have developed throughout this year. The non-strategic savings are listed in Appendix 3, and they total 2.3 million. So despite all of the effort that has gone into finding efficiencies and savings, reductions in costs and services to date, that is still not sufficient to be able to set a balanced budget without an unsustainable use of reserves. So we have taken this step of issuing heads of service with targets totaling 3 million of efficiencies and savings to find. All heads of services are working on them now, and they are to be delivered as soon as practical. And we've got proposals to bring forward for members in March before the start of the financial year. Schools, the pressures and inflation, including the teacher pension I've mentioned, they've been all included in full. The schools budget is our largest budget. We can't protect it in its entirety. So it needs to make some efficiencies, and we've held the line that we have been holding with schools for some time around explaining to them that there is a need for our largest budget to make some savings. We've been communicating that it would be between 2 and 4%, and we've held the line that it would be 3% in this budget. So it's still an increase of 5.6 million to the school's budget, and that's an increase of 5.82% overall. In terms of council tax, based on the additional budget requirements, less the funding and the savings, that requires council tax increases of 8.23% for council services, as Gwyneth mentioned earlier. And then the fire levy, it was at 1.3%, but that reduction brings it down to 1.11%. So that brings the overall council tax level down to 9.34%. from the 9.53 that's in the report. So there'll be a need, if Cabinet wishes to amend that recommendation. The Band D equivalent of that is an increase of £143.40 per annum. That's £1,678.75 overall. Gwyneth mentioned the reserves earlier, so the council has had to use reserves in funding in-year overspends both in the previous financial year, 22-23, and in 23-24. And there is a plan to use reserves to fund exit costs and the pay and grading review. That's a considerable use of reserves, but it's necessary given the financial challenge that the council is in. It's important, though, remember, you can only use reserves once, and they should only be used to fund one-off type of costs, and an over-reliance on reserves is not sustainable. So there is a need to protect reserves, to mitigate risks, and to ensure the council's future resilience. So I would advise against any further use of reserves, given the higher levels of risk that the council is facing and the use that we've had to make to date. So Gwyneth has touched on the higher level of risk in this year's budget, and she's right to do so. The savings target to find is 3 million. Heads of service are working on delivering that as soon as practical. We have a few initiatives that will assist to get to that target, such as the voluntary exit scheme, and also an ongoing review of fees and charges as well. It's a considerable savings target to deliver in year of 7.6 million. So we will need to strengthen financial management in year by tracking those savings monthly, and they'll need to be reported regularly, both to Cabinet but also to scrutiny committees. And that will enable us to identify any issues early so that we can take prompt action when we need to. Forecasting cost pressures in certain areas has been a real challenge this year. So in social care and in homelessness, we have used the latest forecasts of demand, but this comes with risk. So it's prudent where we can to build in some resilience, and that's what we've done with things like the teacher's pension, but also with things like pay, in keeping that at higher than possibly where inflation may be, but it's difficult to forecast where inflation is going. Just to end then, in terms of taking decisions for 24-25, we need to consider the medium-term position. This has worsened as we've worked through this over the year. So 25 financial years 25-26 and 26-27 look worse than 24-25. You will see in the MTFP in Appendix 1, there is no increase in funding from Welsh Government in those years If anything, the funding looks like it's going to be slightly negative, and that coincides with continued increases for demand in services and cost pressures from inflation being higher than has been expected. Assuming council tax increases at 3.8% for both years, that leaves us with a gap of 15 million and 13 million already, respectively. The final point I wanted to make then was we need to view the budget as an ongoing process. We need to understand what we know now and what we don't know. But we must set the 24-25 budget now for council tax purposes. But the work continues on these savings proposals, and further information and updates will be brought to members in March, and will follow the same budget process that we have developed over the past few months. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Really comprehensive overview of the reports for us today. Okay. I will bring in cabinet members, and if anyone wants to come in at this point. Jill, Julie.
Diolch Arweinydd, and diolch Liz and Gwyneth for setting out our position there. I'm grateful for the section in the report that highlights why we've got the settlement we have. So as Liz has quite rightly outlined, the settlement we received was better than predicted, but this is based on the position we find ourselves in Denbighshire, so an increase in population, and most pertinent for me as lead member for Education, Children and Families, a rise in the number of children who are eligible for free school meals. We know that there are many children bubbling below that who also need our attention, but that indicator is really important to me, that we need to protect the services that best protect our children. This is a budget that does that. This is a budget that looks at education and children's services and realises the importance that it plays in our communities. There are glimmers of positive news in there with regard to the work that's being done with Foster Wales to enable us to have our own in-house foster carers, that not only looks at our budget pressures and looks at what we can do about it, but it gives us a much better service as well. So that there are positive strands in here, a spend to save, and a transformation of service that we know we need to make improvements to best serve our communities. I have a particular question for Liz, and I appreciate that this is set out in the report, and she has set out some of the detail in her presentation there. But I wondered if, as many of our members are school governors, and they will want to be able to get across to their school governing bodies what's been set out here, if she could just go through the position in the round for schools. As you've quite rightly said, they hold their own budgets. They're different to other services, but in total, they represent our biggest local authority spend. I just wondered if you could just give us a potted version, if you like, of what this budget means for schools, to enable members to be able to communicate effectively with those governing bodies. Diolch.
Thank you. Yeah, so the increases that have been funded in the schools budget total 7.6 million. So there's 5.5 million in for general inflation, and that includes pay for teaching and non-teaching staff at 5%. It includes funding to cover energy cost increases. It includes funding to cover the cost of rates increases, and it also includes cost of their SLAs increasing. There's also 200,000 in for demographic increases. So that's a net increase in the number of learners that we're teaching throughout the whole school estate. And then we've also included the 5% increase in teacher pensions, which is 1.9 million from April 24. So that total 7.6 million increase. There is an efficiency, 3%, which equates to a reduction of 2.7 million. The net increase is 5.6 million overall, and as a proportion of schools' budget, that's 5.8% increase for schools.
Diolch, Liz. And, you know, I do think it's right and proper that we have absorbed many of the pressures that schools are looking at, the inflationary pressures, the pressures with pay that we've chosen not to pass on to them, and indeed the teachers' pensions decision, which we know we can't really have clarity on, as Welsh Government are waiting for a UK Government decision on that. So I think it's right and proper that we take that on. However, as it is our biggest spend, and as we've modelled to schools through the School Budget Forum for over 6 months now, we've been working on this really carefully. And I think it's right and proper that we've stuck at that mid-range for schools. Although there is an ask of them, we've kept that at an absolute minimum. I have put a robust case for keeping it to that 3%, as I'm sure my Cabinet members can attest to. And we will, of course, continue to maximise the benefit to schools through grant allocation, applying for as many of those as possible. We're extremely successful with those in Denbighshire. Our services work tirelessly to bring down as much money as possible, and indeed the more that they get, the more we're in a position to do so. There are changes to Welsh Government funding, which will be coming through. Like all change, this will take time for us to see an impact, but the Welsh Government are looking at how schools are funded, and we know that there are changes there. So in all, we know that the position is difficult for schools, and I want to make it absolutely clear that I condemn this position that schools in Wales and England face. Local government must be better funded. We must have sufficient funding to be able to deliver quality services and not have to look at the cuts that we've asked for schools and indeed across our services. I absolutely condemn the position we find ourselves in. I know that MPs across the political spectrum have yesterday come together to implore UK government to look at this, to consider what our local government is facing. And indeed, I met myself with the BWYLLGOR MP, James Davis, last week to implore him similarly to take that message back from us, that local government funding must be improved. And it was interesting to see that news today that people across the political spectrum are in agreement. So although I never came into this position to ask for anything from schools, we have found ourselves in a position where it has been enforced upon us. But this position, and I make this clear, should not exist. We need improvements to local government funding. That is the bottom line. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Julie and then Rhys.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Gwyneth, and thank you, Liz, for the report and the comprehensive detail. Just to begin with, I'd just like to echo Councillor German's sentiments there in condemning the position that we're in. You know, our hands are tied. I've said before about being painted into a corner, but we must have a balanced budget. And I think this budget, we've tried our very, very best to prioritise our most vulnerable citizens, and we'll continue to do that with these pressures. I was just going to ask a question, Liz, just seeking some reassurance with regard to using reserves that you spoke at length about. And in particular, you have acknowledged there'll be very little left in some reserves in terms of the regrading and the voluntary exit scheme, which obviously will affect our staff. So how confident are you that will be no requirement to call on other reserves? Because we have noted in the report, it's recognised the costs for the voluntary exit scheme are unquantifiable at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so the corporate earmarked reserves available. So we've got 3 months left of the current financial year, and there's a report later on the agenda around where that's at. So that's currently sitting at a 3.2 million overspend. That will be funded from the budget mitigation reserve. So that leaves a balance in that reserve of 1.5 million. The superannuation recovery reserve that we got, that will all be taken between the voluntary exit and the grading. We still have the modified loan reserve, so there is some reserve left that will protect us in 24-25 against things like demand exceeding pressures. If we don't achieve some of the savings because they are ambitious, there is a risk that we won't. So we have some level of protection there for 24-25. But again, we're in unprecedented times, aren't we? You know, we're seeing things we didn't think we'd see would happen. So I wouldn't want to be over too optimistic and too confident. I want to be realistic. We also need to remember, though, we need to move on to transformation, and transformation costs, and you know, use of reserves to fund transformation will help. You know, it would be nice to be able to set up an invest to save type of reserve, something to pump prime some of the change that's going to be required in order to see us through, and some of our reserves are needed for that. Our un-earmarked reserves, though, which stand at 5.6 million, are still intact. That's what I would call the last line of defence. I wouldn't recommend that we go use any of them. That's why we're keeping them there, because that's the really risky position. Services will also have their reserves, and that's how they manage their budgets in part where they can. So yes, I hope that gives a wider view of where the reserves are at and how finely balanced it is.
Thanks, Liz. Rhys, do you want to come in?
Hefyd wedi agor eich cyfrifiadur i'r un lle, ac o'n i'n mynd I ofyn amdano fo, sef 4.5. Yep. Okay, right. I'm over into it. Felly dwi'n hefyd yn edrych ar, dwi'n dechrau'n edrych ar yr argymhellion yma ac ar 3.5 bod ni yn, os ydyn ni'n cytuno I hyn, bod ni'n mynd I roi caniatâd I ddefnyddio arian sydd wrth gefn fel sydd wedi cael ei osod allan yn 4.5 ac mi oeddwn ni'n bryderus fel dech chi wedi dweud am peidio defnyddio'r arian sydd gennon ni wrth gefn, ond dwi'n meddwl bod chi wedi esbonio hyn. Os oes na staff sy'n penderfynu I ymadael, sef yr exit scheme yma, bod yr arian hynny yn dod o rhywle gwahanol, ac dwi'm yn gwybod llawer iawn am yr Clwyd Pension Fund, ond gallech chi just esbonio pam bod hi'n bosib I ddefnyddio arian o'r gronfa hynny, os gwelwch yn dda? Diolch.
Yeah, no problem, Rhys. So the question relates to 4.5.4 of the report, and it's a reserve that we've got set aside for that's called the pensions reserve, and it stands at 3.6 million. That reserve was set aside, so every 3 years the contributions that the employers make to the Clwyd Pension Fund are reviewed, and that's based on the overall position of that fund, which covers 3 and a bit, because there's a bit of Conwy in it as well, councils in the northeast. So they reset our employer contributions at that time. For the current 3 years that we're in, the contributions actually went down. But if you go back over the past 10 years, those contributions have been increasing because the fund was in a deficit position. So this was set aside in case there was changes in those contributions, because it would buy us as a council a little bit of time in order to increase those contributions. So it was set aside for that purpose. The recommendation is, though, that we now repurpose what that reserve is for, because its need is that was into the future. Its needed now. Its need is greater now, and so we repurpose it and we use it for both the regrading and also the voluntary exit scheme. Of course, we are working through the details of the voluntary exit scheme and what that will cost. We don't know what that will be yet, but we are working on it now. But the proposal is to free up the savings from releasing staff from those budgets that we hold and to fund the costs of that, because they're one-off costs from a one-off reserves in a sort of a matching principle.
Okay, diolch. I'll try not to move around too much this time. Can that reserve be used down to zero, or is it wise to keep money in that reserve? What's the thinking on that, please?
No, it can go to zero. It's, you know, a pot of money that we have earmarked for a purpose. So it's within the cabinet's gift to be able to set aside different pots of money for different reasons. At that point in time, you're not governed in any way that you need to. It's about making sure that you match the reserves with the risk as they pose, and the alternatives around that would be that there would be an in-year risk to the budget that you don't have a reserve for, so it makes sense to line them up.
Thank you. Ellen, and then Gwyneth, did you want to come back in? Yeah. Oh, sorry. I won't go to an auction with you. I look like you had your hand up. Ellen, do you want to come in?
Diolch Liz and Gwyneth and everyone who's been involved with the budget setting process, with the details. This really has been an uncomfortable process, as Gwyneth said, and when we look at the medium-term financial plan, there's every indication that this is going to get a lot worse, which is extremely daunting. I think when discussing these pressures in any context, it's impossible to ignore the impact that social care has on our budget. Across Wales, 50% of all in-year pressures are attributed to social care, which just reflects the scale of this pressure. You've heard it time and time again, demand is increasing, the complexity of needs increasing, and our resources are diminishing. And this all paints an extremely bleak picture for the future of social care provision and by extension, local government, as it's such a substantial and growing part of local government budget, local authority budgets more broadly. So we do recognise this, which is why our focus is on early intervention and preventative services going forward. And investing in this area isn't just a prudent approach now, it's a strategic necessity aimed at trying to assert some control over long-term demand and importantly curtailing costs in the long run. And as we confront the sheer scale of the medium-term financial plan, £50 million shortfall in 2025-26 and almost double that the year after, which is almost incomprehensible, it is so important that we continue to explore innovative and transformative solutions, as Gwyneth's alluded to, and also Liz, in order to pave the way for a sustainable future as we grapple with what is a national financial crisis. So although the future is extremely bleak, there is still an optimist in me deep down who has been tested and who is trying to look at this in a way that crises are catalysts for change, and hopefully this does bring some opportunities for a more transformative and innovative future.
Thanks, Helen. I think it's a good point, and it illustrates another issue. I think we in this debate, in that the world outside hasn't got any easier. There's huge societal problems that put pressure on the services we provide, the social services. People are living longer. Post-COVID, there's a lot more mental health problems out there. We're providing these services in a very, very challenging environment and a very, very difficult world, and I don't think we should lose sight of that, because that again puts the pressure on, increases the money we're spending in blunt terms. Thanks.
I just want to highlight within the budget documents, we do have a cumulative, if I say it right, impact assessment. So we as Cabinet and CET will be keeping an eye on all of the effects on people and places across Denbighshire in particular. We all know that if it's a budget pressure, it generally will have a bigger impact on people, of most vulnerable citizens. And that's, although we've got to keep an eye on the budget and bring that in, we can't forget about the impact and the effects it's going to have on our citizens. And there is, within the recommendations there, it is talking about the council should share its assessment work with the Denbighshire Voluntary Services Council. So we do need to look at the third sector, perhaps supporting us some of these, working more collaboratively, working in partnership with other organisations, because unfortunately, as Ellen's pointed out, the council is shrinking. And we know we've got to think about working in a more innovative way, the transformation, on making sure that we can still deliver what we can to our most vulnerable citizens, our children, families, and the welfare of others. And obviously that would have an impact on the earlier debate on the libraries as well, looking at how we can deliver a little bit differently. So hoping that would give us a little bit of reassurance as Cabinet as well, that we will be reviewing these regularly and looking at these cuts in detail. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Julie. Okay, there's no further contributions, Cabinet. I'll open it up. Bobby, I think you had your hand up. Do you want to come in?
Thank you, Leader. Last week, Graham, you opened the council workshop by saying every day this council does loads of amazing things. They were your words. I wrote them down. Can I say the Cabinet vote to cut our libraries by 40% is not one of them? And it's a pity we couldn't have used more, as Ellen said, innovative and transformative ways of doing this. Over the past 2 years, we have had Welsh Government settlements of 8.2% in 23-24, making 14,231 million, and 3.6% in 24-25, 6.7 million, the highest settlements in Wales. In addition, we have had successful levelling up bids for the Vale of Clwyd and Clwyd West, totalling another 31 million. This time last year, we were settling our council tax at 3.6%, the lowest in Wales. Maybe, Liz, if you'd been here, you may have advised against it. We'll never know. I believe as a Cabinet, you failed to plan ahead, and in doing so, you have failed the residents of Denbighshire. To triple last year's budget, to triple last year's council tax in this budget seems to me to be unacceptable. And for the first time ever, I will be unable to support this budget when it comes to full council next week. I haven't got a question. I just wanted to make that point.
Thanks, Bobby. Yeah, I'll let you back in. Just make a couple of points. The figures you quote from the Welsh Government are pounds and pence that we got. No consideration of inflation, cost pressures, supply chain issues globally. You can quote increases, but the real term, any economist will tell you, it's a massive cut. Real term cut, I think, is 1.2 billion out of the Welsh economy over the, you mentioned 2 years, so that 2-year period, figures quoted from Welsh Government of 1.2 billion out of the Welsh economy in those years. You can't dress it up, Bobby. This local government in Wales and England has had huge cuts. It was mentioned by Councillor German. There was a press story yesterday that even Conservative members of Parliament now are agreeing with what I'm saying, agreeing with what the members are saying. Right-wing Conservative members of Parliament agreeing with what this Cabinet is saying. I'm surprised you mentioned levelling up. levelling up, the levelling up fund, obviously it's to replace the European funding. It's considerably less than European funding. It comes in and out. It doesn't touch the revenue account, has nothing to do with the RSG, which funds these services at all. That's a complete red herring. Levelling up, it is, as I say, to replace European money to fund to fund various projects. Here in Ruthin, for example, done really well. Great, really pleased that Ruthin's got it. BWYLLGOR have had some money recently. We're going to have to curtail that again because of economic forces like inflation. The council tax, yeah, you're right to point out that it is an increase. I was in the press last week acknowledging it's a large increase, but it does reflect incredibly unprecedented times that we're in. Last year, we were able to keep it low in the middle of a cost of living crisis. We've heard as well how that in Wales, they don't have it in England, we've got the council tax reduction scheme. So the most vulnerable, they'll be protected. It is an increase, there's no getting away from that. But you've heard at the beginning of this presentation from Liz and from Gwyneth the need to balance a budget, to put a balanced budget. And I've talked at length, I don't want to go on about them again, about the consequences of not having that be far worse. So Gwyneth, I'm going to bring you in now if you want to come back.
Say in addition to what you've just said, I do appreciate, because I couldn't fail to appreciate, because it's on the news frequently, that local government in some parts of the UK are struggling to survive. All I'm saying is that here in Denbighshire, I'm not looking at the rest of the UK, I'm looking at Denbighshire, and I think we could have done better.
Well, I would strongly disagree. We have to play the cards we're dealt, and we've been dealt pretty poor cards for all the reasons we've been into. I'll bring Gwyneth in.
Yeah. You've said almost everything that I was going to say, but I would just say, you know, on the one hand, you want us to keep the library services, and on the other hand, you want us to lower council tax. And if we did what you suggested, what then?
I'm not saying lower than it is. I'm not saying lower than it is now. I'm saying
Sorry,
3 times that amount is too much.
You want us to reduce the amount that the council tax is raised by, and you want us to not cut services. The result of that would be that we wouldn't be able to balance the budget. I mean, that's just that's the bald truth here. And if we don't balance the budget, we end up in the same situation as the councils that Barry mentioned. I don't know how we get away from that. You know, nobody wants to cut the services. Nobody wants to raise council tax as much as we fear that we have to do that. And, you know, I agree with what Jill said and what Julie said. We should condemn this. This is not right that we're put in this position. So that's all I have to add. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm just saying that what you're planning to do to the library service is short-sighted, because it does so much more. It works hand in hand with social care, for example. It's a drop in the ocean in terms of a budget gap that's getting bigger by the minute, it seems. It seems to be going up towards 30 million now, if not more. And this is a drop in the ocean and a service that should have complemented what we're doing in terms of what several of you have mentioned, transformational services. You're not transforming, you're cutting, cruelly cutting.
Hugh, do you want to come in?
I think whichever way you look at it, the word positive you can't really use around this budget, can you? Because it is what it is. And I think, you know, it's sad that schools are having a cut to 3%. Even it's the wages that we're putting in, so that won't make a difference to a child in the classroom, you know, or a child who's waiting 3 years to be assessed. And then schools need more help financially to look after those children before they're assessed. There's massive challenges across the piece. I think the difficulty of the pill is you're recommending to increase the council tax at the rate that you are. And I think if that was badged with more or keeping services, not losing services, it'd be far easier sale, wouldn't it? Far easier presentation. And I think what I think when we were discussing libraries and stuff at the communities scrutiny is that if we address a saving that's needed, before we make that cut, can we look at the words transformation and initiatives and different things before we make it? I think that's the biggest thing for me. Because, you know, if we could have made the libraries into a hub, with bringing the cabs in or putting cafes in there or doing something different and looked at that as an income, we straight away before making people redundant, I think that would make it better and that make the pill better. But what I'm saying is, it's hard to think that you have to vote on this today when you've still got 3 million missing. And that's not to take into account what happens with the waste thing in Denby, if that has an extra cost, or the Queen's Market, who is just a shell at the moment. We haven't got anybody to run it. You know, there's a lot of flags that could come along the way that there's not even a contingency in this budget for that. Because we don't know, it looks like to me, Liz, tell me if I'm wrong, that the only contingency is the 5 million reserves, if all else goes potentially. We might even have to, you have to draw down on them to take some of that 3 million away if it's not found. And that's without anything else that's beyond control. So I think, would it not be prudent to have the savings in place of that 3 million? So you would then vote on that then, because potentially in 3 months' time, you could be coming back to this table saying I want 15% because I haven't got the 3 million.
Okay, number of good points there, Hugh. And again, I think, you know, we're not in a disagreement. What I would say, though, is I think the position we're in, you heard Gwyneth and Liz speak about processes, we're in completely unprecedented times here. The huge cuts that we've had in this last year reflects that difficulty. I can't, you know, I sound like a stuck record, but I'll make no apologies for it. The level of cuts, the level of hit we've taken forces our hand on this. So you're absolutely right. We are looking at services being cut, and we are looking at increasing council tax. That's the reality of presenting the balanced budget, and it's been incredibly challenging. So I'll bring Gwyneth in and Liz. I think, Alan, you wanted to come in, and then Graham.
Ie, diolch Arweinydd. Dwi'n cytuno efo beth ti'n neud. Mae'n sefyllfa digynsel. Da ni ddim wedi bod yn y sefyllfa yma o blaen. Da ni'n gorfod wneud toriadau ac ar yr un pryd da ni'n gorfod codi treth y cyngor, a mae o'n ofnadwy o anghyffyrddus i fod yn y sefyllfa yma. Y rheswm na allan ni ddim disgwyl ydy fod rhaid i ni gael cytuno ar gyllideb cytbwys. Mae hynna'n ddyletswydd arno ni yn ôl y gyfraith. Felly dyna pam na allan ni ddim disgwyl. Mi fysa'n gret os ydyn ni'n gallu disgwyl a bod ni'n dod ar y pecyn o'r 3 miliwn yma. Ond mae lot o'r arbedion yn mynd i fod yn rhy bach. Mae penaethiaid gwasanaethau yn mynd i wneud arbedion yn y ffordd maen nhw'n rhedeg i busnes o ddydd i ddydd yn arbedion bach, a gobeithio bod hynny'n mynd i adio i fyny ac yr lle da ni isio. Mae yna bethau eraill yn y gyllideb sydd yn helpu, fel mae Liz wedi deud yn barod, da ni wedi cymryd y pressure amdano yr cyflogau'r athrawon. Mae'n bosib y gawn ni, allan ni groesi bysad a byddwn ni'n cael pres amdano hynny. Da ni wedi rhoi yr lefel chwyddiant ar gyfer cyflogau ella chydig bach yn uwch na'r disgwyl, ond eto fel mae Liz yn deud, da ni ddim yn gallu rhagweld beth. Mae well bod o chydig bach yn uwch na bod o lot yn is, dydy. Felly mae yna chydig o bethau eraill yn y gyllideb sydd, ond ti'n hollol gywir, mae yna risg y byddwn ni'n gorfod mynd i fewn i rei o'r reserves mae sgynnon ni. Dyna pam bod hi'n bwysig bod ni'n ei cadw nhw ac yn delio nhw fel mae o'n deud yn y adroddiad. Diolch yw.
Graham, did you want to come in on that particular point, didn't you? Then,
yeah, if I can, Leader, thank you. In order to, Hugh's raised some interesting points around how you look at the budget settings. So if I'm going to ask Liz a couple of questions. Sorry, Liz, if I turn to the medium-term financial plan, because you're right, of course, part of this is about cuts, but those cuts are required in order to invest in other services because of the demand led. So, Liz, in terms of Hugh's question around why don't we talk about investing in services, am I right when I look in the medium-term financial plan that in terms of adult and social care, we're investing £8 million extra on top of the 30-odd million pounds we're already spending this year? Next year, our budget is saying we're going to invest in adult and social care and homes to the tune of £8 million.
Correct.
Are we investing in children's services an extra £2 million?
Yes.
Are we putting £5.5 million inflation into schools?
Yes, plus the teacher pension of 1.9
Yeah.
million and the demographic of 200,000, so they total 7.6 million investment in school.
So they are the pressures in which we are investing. Now, the money from the government doesn't cover all that, plus other things. So we've got to find savings elsewhere in order to cover that investment in those things that are probably, in terms of the most vulnerable in society, if we talk about schools, adult social care and homelessness and children's services, are the areas in which we're having to invest because it's demand led. And other areas of the council are having to experience cuts and savings in order to allow us to put that investment in those. So that's what I would say to that. And the other issue,
So sorry, Graham, just for example, let's use children's services. Tell me, what was the figure for children's services, Liz? Sorry, I'm going 2 million. So what are you investing in children's services for 2 million?
Okay, Liz has done the homework. I mean, I'm happy to come in, but I know Liz knows.
These are the costs of children's placements, the increase in children placement, the demand for increases in children placement that we're facing currently.
So let's get the wording right. It's not an investment, is it? It's a cost that you've got to bear.
It's
You have no choice.
Let's split hairs. It's
Yeah.
additional money
That's better.
going into a service.
If I could come in, that there is investment. There's investment in what we're looking at to do with our foster care services that I set out when I spoke earlier. So we're investing to put things in place that will attract more foster carers into our service so we don't have to go to expensive agencies. So that isn't just dealing with what's coming down the line to us. That is exactly what you say, Hugh. It's a transformative action to address needs in a service that we know are unsustainable and that we're having to firefight in order to put that extra investment in. But what we're also looking at is the ways that we can address it by transformation. We have something called LIFT that exists in children's services that goes to families who are perhaps struggling and the children may be on the edge of care. That's something else that we invest in to look at the issues that are going on in children's services and to transform what we do. But let's be honest, our wings are clipped a little because of the financial position that we find ourselves in. But I can absolutely assure you that that work is going on. It has been going on, and this budget contains details on what's going on with our Foster Wales Denbighshire service to address the issues that we face.
So I accept the point about invest or putting money in or whatever it is, but I mean, that's part of the problem that we've got in terms of those additional money that has to go into some of those services. The other point was a good one around, we've had a number of major savings proposals and you've seen the list. Now, not all the things on the list have come through because it takes time and takes effort, and some of those things that we thought might deliver savings on the major budget savings haven't come through. It's in the list of the ones where we have, that comes to about 2.3 million. And then there's another list of ones where we haven't because we're still working on those. And that has meant, in effect, that we've had to put this extra 3 million back to services because some of the bigger projects haven't come through. So there is an element of the 3 million that we're asking services to find that at the moment we don't know what they all are. But when you said the contingency for that, there is, because what we've got is the voluntary redundancy scheme. So we know that a certain amount of those voluntary redundancy schemes that we're currently running, they will come off the 3 million. So they are part of what the services are trying to find in terms of the voluntary redundancy scheme. And we're still running through that process, but it will end in the not too distant future. And I think we had about 100 and someone's going to have to help me. Gary can help me. How many broadly requests? I mean, 120?
Just over 130.
So we had about 130 requests for that. Now, clearly, we're making an assessment as whether all those are affordable, because some of them won't be, because there'll be pension strains and other costs associated with that. So it's kind of got to wash its face, as it were. And also, not all can go just from delivery perspective if we've got an issue around what that would do to services that are being provided. So we're working hard on trying to get that balance around that 3 million. And I just want to make sure we were clear around this kind of investing in services, or why we're having to spend extra money in certain services that other services are having to face the cut, so we can put that extra money in. Thank you.
Can I just go the school thing probably in my head, but when you budget that we're investing in inflation in schools, there's investment in every single department in inflation in pay in this budget. It's not just schools. So I think it's unfair that we're using that as a aren't we doing well? But you know, the chief executive department, the legal department, the builders department, they get that inflation the same as every member of staff does on the pay increase.
We seem to have concentrated the debate on education. There's nothing wrong with that. It's one of the biggest things that we do deliver, and that's fair enough. But I think, yeah, it's a fair challenge. And on the wider point, I think what we've touched on is what I've said earlier. You know, why are we having more assessments in schools? Because of societal problems. It's a tough world out there, and those are the pressures we're under. Okay, final word on the educational point, if you want to come in, Jill, and then we'll go.
Yeah, just to say, and again, going back to what I set out earlier, we're absorbing pressures that we're not passing on to schools. So that is what we're taking on as far as a big undertaking in the budget. We're making sure the pressures aren't passed on. I work closely with colleagues across Wales in the same position as me, and indeed in other cabinet members, other deputy leaders and leaders. And I know that that is not absolutely the case across the board. So as in Denbighshire, we have chosen to absorb those pressures so that schools don't have them to bear, as well as the other challenges they face. And I repeat, just to finish, I absolutely condemn the fact that we're having to ask our schools for savings, but it is absolutely because of the situation that we find ourselves in that is unavoidable. But I condemn completely that that is happening. It's not something that we want to do, but we are in a position where it is unavoidable, and we will work with schools to mitigate that as much as possible.
Thanks. Thank you, Hugh. Ellen's been waiting patiently. Thanks. And I've got David on the screen as well.
Diolch, Leader. I just wanted to quickly come in just to clarify that although I talked about transformative change, I by no means meant that that can entirely replace the need to find savings. I'm not naive enough to think that that would work. There is, of course, an opportunity here to look at areas to deliver transformative change, but that's a long-term aspiration. It needs to work alongside the urgent need to find and achieve savings in order to present a balanced and legal budget. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thanks, Ellen. Okay, on the screen, David, you've got your hand up. Do you want to come in? Unmute and come in.
Yes, please. Can you hear me?
Can hear you loud and clear. Go ahead. Thanks.
Okay. I don't know if this is a general financial one. Am I allowed to ask that at the moment, or is it purely education?
No, but it is the budget.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. Thank you, Jason. This isn't, believe me, this is not political. It's a genuine question, and Graham Bowes will know I voiced my concerns about this some months ago, and he will, I'm sure, recall that. The proposed, I know it's a consultation programme at the moment, but if the proposed national park for North East Wales comes about and is passed, there's going to be a massive financial burden, not only on Cardiff, but on the local authorities concerned, which will very much include us. Given the fact that both Cardiff and ourselves are in dire financial straits, should not the very idea of a new national park be shelved for the time being, because we're not in a position to fund it? Thank you.
Okay, that's a good question and a good challenge, David. Gwyneth has indicated she's going to come in.
Yeah, thanks.
And I think Graham wants to come in as well.
Thanks, David. I mean, the only thing I can say about this is that at the moment we don't know whether the proposed national park will come to be, and if it comes to be, we don't know what the funding mechanism for it will be. So I don't think we can take any.
Could I just interrupt you there, please, Gwyneth, for a minute? No, I appreciate it's all in flux at the moment, but I know that the financial responsibility would be split, I believe 60% from Cardiff or 66 and 33% from the relevant local authorities. Whatever amount it is, Gwyneth, and I know we know it's not certain yet, whatever amount it is going to be too much because we just haven't got the money, neither ourselves nor Cardiff. So again, it begs the question, should the whole idea of a new national park perhaps not be shelved for the time being? Or could this message perhaps be carried back to Cardiff? Thank you.
Okay, thanks,
No,
David.
I just wanted to repeat really what the funding mechanism that's proposed for it is if the proposed national park even happens. So it cannot be a consideration for this budget. It's something completely different. You know, your concerns are valid and I share them, but they're not part of this budget in any way.
And I've got Wyn, who's the lead member on this, with a hand up. Wyn, so do you want to come in as well?
Yes, thank you, Leader. I really want to echo what Gwyneth said there. This is not a subject for this budget. This is something that we will be looking at in the future. And David has, you know, it's very good that he raises these questions. They're very valid. And I certainly would like to talk to him about it in the future. But at the moment, this is not an issue for this budget. Thank you.
Thanks, Wyn. You're right, it's not an issue for the budget, but it's an issue for the council. And
yeah,
we've actually got a workshop on it coming up in the next couple of months. Gary, can you?
That's right.
Yes, Leader, on the 9th of April at Council Workshop, Natural Resources Wales are attending to provide members with an update on the National Park proposal, so there'll be an opportunity for members to ask questions and debate that issue then.
So there's your challenge, Dave. Get your questions ready for Natural Resources Wales. Put it in your diary, 9th of April. Okay, good question, thank you. Okay, there's no further hands up, so we're going to go to the recommendation. There's going to be some amendments around the overnight decision by the Fire Authority. So, Gwyneth, can I go to you to wind up, look at the recommendations, and then Liz, if you want any final words, and then Gary to clarify what we're voting on.
Diolch Arweinydd. Felly, yr argymhellion ydy, a mae yna nifer ohonyn nhw, yn gynta, i nodi effaith y setliad dros dro ar gyfer 2024-2025. I wneud hynna'n hollol glir, y setliad gan Llywodraeth Cymru ydy hynna. Setliad dros dro ydy ar hyn o bryd, achos dydyn nhw ddim wedi dod i'r penderfyniad terfynol arno fo. Yn ail, bod y Cabinet yn cefnogi'r cynigion a amlinellir yn atodiad 1 ac yn manylu'r arnynt yn adran 4 ac yn ei hargymell i'r cyngor llawn er mwyn llunio'r gyllideb yn derfynol ar gyfer 2024-2025. Yn drydydd, i argymell i'r cyngor y cynnydd cyfartalog o 8.23 yn rheth y cyngor ar gyfer gwasanaethau'r cyngor, ynghyd â, a mae hwn yn newid, 1.11 y cant ychwanegol ar gyfer y cynnydd yn yr ardoll i awdurdod tân ag achub Gogledd Cymru. Mae hyn yn cyfateb i gynnydd cyffredinol o, ag eto mae hyn yn newid, 9.34 y cant arfeithedig ym mharagraff 4.4. Yn bedwerydd, argymell i'r cyngor fod awdurdod yn cael ei ddirprwyo i'r pennaeth cyllid ac archwilio mewn ymgynghoriad ar aelod arweiniol cyllid i addasu'r defnydd o arian wrth gefn sydd wedi gynnwys yng nghynigion y gyllideb o hyd at 500,000 os oes yna symud rhwng ffigurau'r setliad drafft a'r setliad terfynol er mwyn gallu gosod treth y cyngor yn amserol. A mae hyn yn fater bach technegol, ella bod Liz eisiau egluro cyn bod ni'n mynd i bleidlais, ond mae o'n fater bach technegol er mwyn gallu gwneud rhywbeth mewn amser. Ac yn bumed bod y Cabinet yn cefnogi'r strategaeth i ddefnyddio arian wrth gefn fel y nodir ym mharagraff 4.5 ac yn ei argymell i'r cyngor llawn. Ac yn ola, bod y Cabinet yn cadarnhau ei fod wedi darllen, deall ac ystyried yr asesiad o'r effaith ar les fel y nodir yn adran 7. Diolch.
Thank you. So I think Gwyneth's picked up the changes that we needed to make to recommendation 3.3, but just to explain 3.4, the need for that delegated authority. It's a draft settlement. We'll receive the final settlement, but it'll be March. There is a need, there's a lead-in time by which we need to inform residents of their council tax bills, the direct debits. We need to give a set period of notice. So therefore, it's customary that we put this limit in place whereby we are able to make minor adjustments to the budget in order to be able to get the council tax information out to residents in a timely way so that we can collect the direct debit at its first monthly payment in April.
Thanks. Okay, so we've got clarity on the recommendations. I'm happy that we can go to the vote. Could I have a proposer for the recommendations proposed by Councillor Gwyneth Ellis, seconded by Councillor Barry Mellor? So we'll vote all those in favour. Wynn's got a hand up as well. It's unanimous. Okay, thanks very much. Thank you, everyone. Good debate. Extremely challenging topic. Thanks, everyone, Cabinet and non-Cabinet members as well. I was going to propose a short break, but I can see Paul has been waiting patiently for the next agenda item. Are you okay? We'll have 10 minutes. Yeah. Thanks, Paul. Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you. We're still with Gwyneth, and we're joined by Paul Barnes, and we're going to look at a paper on our response to the Welsh Government's proposals around changes to council tax. So, Gwyneth, I'll hand over to you.
Diolch yn fawr iawn Arweinydd. Ie, felly fel dydwch chi, mae Llywodraeth Cymru yn ymgynghori ar hyn o bryd ar dreth gyngor DECACH, lle maen nhw'n edrych ar werth tai a newid y bandiau ac yn y blaen. Mae'n lot o fanylder, ond mi wna i adael i Paul egluro hynna i gyd i chi, mae o'n gwybod y cyfan. Mi da ni fel cyngor angen ymateb i'r ymgynghoriad yna. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul, and thanks for waiting patiently.
No problem at all. Thank you, Diolch. Good afternoon, everybody. If I take you through the highlight of the report and then clearly open for questions, if that's okay. So the Welsh Government opened their consultation on fairer council tax on the 16th of December, and that consultation needs to be completed and submitted to Welsh Government by the 6th of February. So the timescales around this are quite challenging and quite tight. There are mainly two key areas to the consultation that we're discussing, I thought bring to your attention today. The first one is around fundamental changes around the proposal to the system and rating of council tax. And the second one is around the timescales that they're proposing around that implementation. So I'll take you through those 2 points, if I may. So the first one, when it comes to the proposed changes, they fall into three categories, and they fall under a minimal change, a modest change, and an expanded change. These are all detailed in the report. The minimal change is a re-evaluation of the 9 current bands that we have within council tax, and that re-evaluation last took place in 2005. So it's been a significant amount of time since that re-evaluation work's been done. So the first proposal is to go through a re-evaluation of those current bands. The second proposal is the modest change, and that change is similar to the first, but it actually changes the bottom and top bands slightly by the algorithms, the way they calculate that. So in essence, what it means is people at the bottom would pay less and people at the top would pay more, but they are still within those existing 9 bands that we have within our current council tax structure. And the final and most expansive and the proposal that Welsh Government deemed to be fairest is a more significant overhaul with a creation of an additional bands to take the banding system from 9 to 12. So that means that there would be 12 separate bands within the council tax structure. And this is deemed by Welsh Government to be the most expansive changes that they're proposing. As we move through those and we get to the expansive, every time that we go through those different options, the impact on Denbighshire's residents is more significant. And that significant impact is there is a reduction. Denbighshire is a bit of an outlier here in regards to we would benefit as council tax, or council taxpayers in Denbighshire would see a reduction in the lower bands in their council tax. And the greater we go to the extent of change, the greater that reduction would be. And there's stats in your pack to support that information. The second proposal that's come forward is around the timeframe that we would implement these changes within. So the first proposal is that they would be completed by 2025. The second is that they would be deferred to 2028, or there is a halfway house, which is an incremental change, which would mean minor changes around the revaluation could be done in 2025, but the more extensive changes around increasing the number of bands would be done by 2028. On both of these items, Denbighshire has recommended that, and put in the consultation, that we would prefer you to support the expanded scheme because it has the greatest impact and benefit to Denbighshire taxpayers, and also that we would do it in an incremental manner. And that would mean that we would actually do, it would give us time to implement these changes in a really controlled and effective way. So that would be the options that we put forward to you today. There is a risk that we do mention, and we highlight it in our consultation response, and that's around the fact that we are potentially looking in the region of about £8 million coming from being reduced or removed from our tax base. So this would be the income that we lost as an authority that would be raised by council tax by moving to this new band structure if we went to the expanded scheme. That means that additional income would need to come from an additional source, and that source would be the RSG, which is the Revenue Support Grant that comes from Welsh Government. So we would move the reliance from the authority on an income driven by taxpayers within the county to an income that would come from Welsh Government through a support grant. So it's important to raise that point to make members aware of it, but I think we detail that within the consultation in Appendix 4. That's a summary of where we are and the main highlights of the report so far. So I thought that would give you an overview of where we are. Any questions we can take from there.
Okay, thank you. So any questions? Helen?
Thank you. Just to say that I'm wholeheartedly in favour of supporting this recommendation for the expanded reform proposal. And I applaud Welsh Government's efforts to rectify what remains an outdated, unfair and regressive system. As we know and seen, Welsh councils are having to respond to the pervasive UK funding crisis by increasing council tax by relatively high margins in order to mitigate the risk of bankruptcy. So this really does reinforce the pressing need for a fairer system in order to alleviate that burden on our residents. So I do fully support this rather progressive step forward.
Okay, thanks. Gwyneth?
Thank you, Paul. And thank you for all the work that you've done on this. I think it is important, as you've pointed out, that in our response we do highlight the risk to the RSG and that we want a fairer system for the residents, but it has to be, as we've already discussed today in the budget, it has to be fair on two fronts, doesn't it? So one is how much they pay, but the other one is the services that they get, and that depends on the income that we get, which will, if this goes ahead, it will increasingly depend on the revenue support grant. So that needs to be a proper grant that redistributes wealth across Wales, and we get our fair share of it. And also the response does mention the capital grant that we get from the Welsh Government, and that also needs to be fair and proportionate for our needs. So yes, I wholeheartedly support this response, and thank you very much for your work.
Thanks, Gwyneth. Just a question from myself, Paul. I think seen some figures and some graphs and comparables across Wales. I think it works for us on the basis that our property values in Denbighshire haven't risen as quickly as elsewhere in the country. That's right, isn't it?
Yes. Yes, that's correct.
Incidentally, as well, I saw a report on over the weekend. I should have sent it to you from the Institute for Fiscal Studies. I don't know if you've seen that. They responded to the consultation right at the end of last year, so it's quite a new report, and they wholeheartedly endorse it as well as a way forward. I'll send you that report. Okay, any more further questions, Rhys?
Diolch Arweinydd. Dwi fel Gwyneth yn poeni am yr RSG yma. O ddarllen hyn, mae'n dweud y copi Saesneg sy'n digwydd bod fyny fan hyn, where Welsh Government have committed to ensuring any loss in council tax will be compensated via the RSG, ond dydy o ddim yn dweud yn y flwyddyn gynta, am y 5 mlynedd gynta, dydy o ddim yn dweud am pa mor hir. Felly, yn y trafodaethau, mae eisiau gwneud yn siŵr bod hyn yn rhywbeth parhaol ac nid ond am y cyfnod pan mae hyn yn dod i fewn. Basai'n hawdd iawn ar ôl 2 blynedd i ddweud, wel, dych chi ar ben eich hun rwan gyda treth cyngor. Diolch yn fawr.
Yeah, thank you. It's the way the system works now is the RSG is allocated based on a local authority's ability to raise council tax, and so the RSG compensates for that. It's one of those where we need to see the detail in order to be able to understand it. So whilst that principle would still be there for the county of Denbighshire as the county in each of the 3 options under consideration is the one where the council tax base moves the most, and wherefore the RSG, so if you look at those graphs, we're at the top and the bottom in terms of the bar and the line for each one of those 3 proposals. So that's why we're flagging it. That principle would still be there, but how does that principle come through in detail, isn't it? That's what we don't have in front of us, and that's why we're keen to stress that in our response to the consultation, if it helps.
Thanks, Liz. Okay, any more questions, Jill?
Just very quickly, based on what other members have said, to highlight the importance of consultations like this. It's really important that Welsh Government and local authorities work together as much as possible, and our response to this is extremely important to reflect what we've heard are obviously it's support for what that means for our residents, but our concerns as well for how our council services are run moving forward. So just to highlight, I think it's a good response. I think it's an important response, and that all of us as local authorities need to feed into this, so we can continue to work hand in hand with Welsh Government to find the best way forward.
Thanks. Any questions from any other members on papers before us? No? Okay. Gwyneth, if you could take us to the recommendations then, thanks.
Diolch yn fawr, Arweinydd. Felly mae yna 2 argymhelliad efo'r cynnig yma. Yn gyntaf, bod y Cabinet yn cymeradwyo'r ymateb arfaethedig i'r ymgynghoriad fel y nodir yn atodiad 4. Cefnogi argymhellion y swyddogion ar y cynnig estynedig a'i darparu drwy ddull cynyddranol. Ac yn ail, bod y penderfyniad hwn yn cael ei roi ar waith ar unwaith fel penderfyniad brys dan adran 7.25 cyfansoddiad y cyngor. Mae'r rhesymeg dros hyn ym mharagraff 4.4. Diolch yn fawr.
Mary Mellor, seconded by Rhys Thomas, in favour. Okay, unanimous. Thank you. Okay, thanks, Paul. Thank you. So it's clearly a busy day for Liz and Gwyneth. We remain. We are with the monthly finance report, agenda item 8. Thank you. You want to go in, Liz? Or? Yeah, Liz.
Thank you. So this is the 23-24 finance update report as of December. Appendix 1 summarises the council's revenue budget for 23-24. We're forecasting an overspend of 3.2 million at the end of the financial year, compared with the 3.3 million overspend that we were forecasting last month. So that's a slight decrease in the overspend at a reduction of 96,000. There is some movements within that though. The areas of overspend continue to be in education and children's services, in highways and environmental services, and in adult social care and homelessness. The movements are all explained in Appendix 2. To highlight some of the bigger movements though, we've seen an increase in education and children's services due to the needs of 2 existing placements increasing, and that results in a negative movement of 480,000. That's compensated though by the fact that we have been challenging all services in recent months to find in-year savings by ceasing any non-essential spending and delaying any expenditure where possible. And the results of that has come through in the budget monitoring this month, with nearly all service areas showing a reduction in the expenditure that they were previously forecasting, and that has offset the movements in the children's services placements to bring us to a slight reduction in the overspend. HRA is reporting a slight reduction in their underspend, so that's moved down to 108,000, down from 122,000, and that's due to a slight reduction in rental income. The forecast year-end balance there, 754,000. There's no change this month in the forecast use of reserves for schools, that remains at a use of reserves of just over 7 million. And the usual capital appendices are there. We've got the capital plan summarised in Appendix 3 and the major capital projects update in Appendix 4, which reflects updated positions on some of our larger capital schemes that are ongoing. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Okay. Any questions around the monthly reports? Barry?
Yeah. I still find it incredible that all the councillors that was here this morning worrying about budget setting and what we've got to do, where we are with the budget, yet they've all gone except for the 2 ladies here. And the most important thing is the finance report. I can't understand that the backbenchers just don't seem to be interested in the budget until they want to tackle the cabinet of making difficult decisions. I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Thanks, Barry. Thank you. Okay, do any of the other members want to come in on Liz's report, Liz's presentation? No? Okay. So yeah, once again, Liz, thank you. It's, Barry's mentioned it's important that we have these monthly reports, snapshots of where we are, looking at the medium-term plan, looking at where we're going forward. It's important that we all keep an eye on these. And in view of the budget discussions we had earlier, it's absolutely imperative. You've said yourself that we're going through to scrutiny. So, okay, thanks everyone. The recommendations is just to note, isn't it? So, there's no formal recommendation as such. We'll just thank Liz and Gwyneth for the continuing hard work on this. Thank you. Okay.
Not for the forward work programme. There's just one change to the forward work programme that's happened since this was published. So in February, there will be a report on the capital budget proposals for 2024-25 to seek cabinet approval of those proposals. That's coming February.
Okay. Any questions on the forward work programme? No. Okay, so we are now going to go to the final item, which is in part 2. So Gary, if you can go through the legalities.
Yes, it's effectively a report which contains information which is considered to be exempt because it relates to the financial affairs of the council and a third party. So that's the recommendation, but obviously it's for members to vote to go into part 2. So you just need a proposer and a seconder if you're minded to go into part two.
Okay, so having heard the advice on the local government legislation, would anyone propose that we go into part two, proposed by Barry, seconded by Rees? Okay, so we're going to go to part two discussion.